Lane, be careful of the internet. It's a dangerous place. You must not confuse it with real life. Father, what is futa? Oh. Okay, I'm not that old, but I'm old enough to remember when people treated the internet as a tool rather than a part of them. Back in the early days of the internet, chat rooms, forums, image boards, that's where shit would pop off. If you wanted to know anything about anything, you would go to one of these spaces. Wanted to know how to fix your catalytic converter? Go to one of these spaces. Needed to replace it? Go to one of these spaces. Need to know how to steal someone else's catalytic converter to replace your old one? You would go to one of these spaces. Now it seems as though a lot has changed, and I find that a lot of people are conflating their real life with the internet. I want to talk about my observations and what I've seen, and maybe the cause as to why it's like that. And I think it just all ties to one company. So without further ado, let's begin. All right, so the golden age of anonymity. So this is the late 90s to early 2000s. People are just exploring computer mediated communication, CMC, and everything's new, everything's fun. People use it as like kind of a way to escape their daily life and kind of remove themselves a little bit from the real world. Pseudonyms were allowed for identity exploration and privacy, and people use them all the time. Very rarely would you see someone go by their real name on these early forms of communication. Most of the time, they'd be using some sort of avatar or alias or something of the sort, because this was a method of escapism rather than something that was connected directly to them. I think there is a big thrill in creating a persona that was completely disconnected from, real jobs or like your real social circle. And it allowed you to embark in communities of like mutual interest rather than go into these communities to either like flex or to boast or to like show off or something like that. Most of the time people were in those communities just for the sake of the topic that they were in. And you see some of that now, but it really seemed like that was the meta back in the day. People really did it for the love of the game. And people really got the chance to express themselves because, one, nobody knew who you were. Two, you didn't know who anyone else was. And three, you guys were only focused on that one thing, that one topic. Whether it was like anime culture or like Dungeons and Dragons or something of the sort. And these communities still exist right now, but before I felt it was really for the love of the game. And now I have the feeling that a lot of it is just for show rather than for the love of the interest. We tend to do a lot of things that are trendy now and look good to other people rather than what we feel like doing. And I think that's in part because we get clout points, Our social status is now tied to the internet, which can cause us to do things that we really don't want to do, but we feel the need to show others that we're doing them. And we are now so connected to the internet, in our phones and stuff like that, that it affects us both mentally and physically too. Have you ever had a situation where you were either so angry or so sad because of something online that you were physically hurt by it? And this is like completely unnatural, right? Back in the day, when you were done with the day or done in public, you would go back home to your own space and you'd probably like slam a beer or something like that and not have to worry about like public criticism or anything of the sort. And now it's almost like you have a clone of yourself in the middle of town hall where there's a part of you that people constantly see regardless of whether or not you're actually there. And you still get affected by this and it's still etched in the back of your mind because it's almost like you can feel that energy even if you're offline. And I feel like that's a major cause of anxiety for people my age or younger because we're constantly thinking or we constantly know that other people are somehow judging or watching what we do even if we're not even in front of them. And this is most likely the fault of, actually, not even most likely, this is 100% the fault of Facebook, because they were the pioneers of that real name policy that pretty much erased all the boundaries between digital and physical lives. They created sort of this like feeling of psychological invasion, right? Because now that alias, that pseudonym that you had before is completely erased and you are now responsible for everything you do on the internet. Like everything you do on the internet now comes back to you because now your real identity is attached to this persona online. And it sort of creates like a context collapse, because before you could, deal with multiple social circles one at a time, and now they're just all in one public space. So you find it hard to actually deal with all of that. And, I wish that was the worst of it, but it looks like it's going to just get a lot worse. I'd hate to be like a doomer here, like Asmongold or something like that, but it feels like there's really no end to this sort of mixing of the internet with, your personal life. Technology is only getting better. There's AI, there's biometric tracking. A lot of algorithms are getting really good, and they're getting really good at starting to predict what you want before you even know you want it. There's dynamic pricing that companies are trying to practice with right now. Very soon privacy is going to be a thing of the past, and it will get to the point where not only is your privacy at stake, but like your own intuition. I find a lot of the time that like algorithms that I use start to guide me to make decisions that I normally wouldn't make by myself, and I kind of notice that as a problem. And there's already a lot of other things too, such as like data brokers, services that offer like reverse IP lookup so they can track you normally. And as I mentioned before, like the targeted manipulation, where like there's dynamic pricing and stuff like that. As gloomy as it does sound, I think there are a few ways that you can kind of like remove yourself from all of this in the present before it gets too bad. And the first of those is definitely know when to unplug yourself. The worst thing you want to be is chronically online, because you're just constantly taking in information that really is not that relevant to you yet, but you're just seeing all this all at once, and you start to become what your feed shows you. If you're admin on using like social media and stuff like that, try not to just go in there without having a specific purpose in mind. Like try not to like blindly scroll. Try to like go there if you're looking for something rather than looking for something to find you, if that makes any sense. And if you really care about it, just don't dox yourself. Nowadays, you don't necessarily have to be Mossad to create a profile on someone. Most of the time, people have everything they've ever done online, and it's not that hard to find. You could just search up their name on Google, and you could probably find everything about that person. But also adding to that, try not to compare yourself too much to people online. Because even though we talked about the lines blurring between real life and the internet, a lot of people are just faking it. So it's best if you don't take it too seriously yet. And last but not least, just try to create a buffer between what you do on the internet and what you do in real life, so you don't end up blurring those lines yourself. I think that's all I'm going to say for today. If there's any one lesson you can learn from this video, it's that a lot of the things you believe affect you really have no power over you, and you have complete free will to believe in them or not believe in them as you see fit. All right, I made a lot of contradictions in this video, I'm pretty sure, but I don't give a fuck. Later.